in terms of what I had prepared, and maybe just do it as practical for you as is possible. I have spent the last 15 years of my life recruiting in the HR space, among other things, but let's talk about HR because that's why we're all here. Right across the globe. So I'm Australian by passport. I live in Europe, I live in Switzerland, and I spend most of my time doing projects anywhere from New York, Philadelphia, etc., all the way around. So I'd love to be able to have a discussion with you in terms of what's happening in HR in the rest of the world. Okay? There are a couple of things that I'm going to highlight. And the first one that I thought was really, really interesting, just to be provocative, if you could just bring that up. Okay, so I'm not going to get up. No. I'll sit. You can see and hear me, right? I feel really tall this way. If you look at, this is best in class, right? What does best in class mean, going back to Joseph's presentation? What I decided to do here, should I put the mic on? Ready? Okay. Can you hear me better? Is this okay? So what was really interesting for me to have a look at using this model is best in class, which is, in today's definition, and this is the world we live in, which is the highest paid. In other words, those that have the highest base salary, but also the bonusing, which is the variable component, which, as you know, is always a recognition of performance, quite often based on personal performance and also company performance. But personal is a huge element in it. So we assume that those that are the highest paid are, let's say, best in class. So it's a small population out of the full population that Korn Ferry carries. It's about 20%. And the population size is huge. So if we look at the CHRO and we look at the CEO, there's one thing that became apparent to me, and this was a surprise to me as well, so I love this. If you look at the shapes of the leadership, of the thinking style, and of the emotional competencies, they are actually the same shape. So I sort of went, oh, wow. Okay, because the biggest issue I deal with right now is how can we get HR to non-executive boards, okay? Because HR has been so much in evolution over the years, and yet, so we got over the hurdle of HR not sitting on management boards, because now most companies have it on management boards. Now my next challenge is don't stop there, right? Because that's boring. We got over that hurdle. Now let's move it to the non-executive board, and we see it, and it's happening. In the last 3 months, I've done 2 non-executives, okay, of FTSE boards.
Explain exactly what does it mean, non-executive, because I don't know.
So you are sitting on a board of a company, and you are not a full-time employee. You're on the advisory with the chairman, okay? And interestingly enough, the remuneration committees are not always run by the HR person who sits on the boards. They're not. They can, because obviously HR knows comp and ben, hopefully, by that level, but it's not a must. There is not a direct correlation, nor the nominations committee. Nominations committee, the succession committee, right? What sort of checking off what's happening in terms of, you know, the next best-in-class talent. And I'll talk about that if you're interested a little bit later. So I can talk ad nauseum about this. However, the interesting thing here is, wow, this is really similar in shape. So HR people at senior levels, and I'll show you the slightly more junior profiles a bit later, are actually really similar to the CEOs. And if I can ask you to go to the next one, because then I said to the guys in our team, can you show me what the CFOs and the CIOs look like? Because the most likely successor to a CEO is usually the... Exactly. Have a look at that. Have a look at that. For me, this was wow. Just look at the shapes. Don't start analyzing, okay? I know that we all like, it's established, Israeli HR likes lots of intellectual data, right? I got that. However, if you look at it from this point of view, high level, it's amazing. Yeah. So the question is, where's the future? And why shouldn't the chief HR be the next CEO? And what will it take to get there? And what is HR not doing today in order to be able to get there? And what is HR in emerging markets? What is HR in established markets? And what is HR in what I call somewhere in between emerging markets? Israel is not an emerging market. Israel is a completely educated, maybe not quite mature yet. Maybe not quite mature because it doesn't cover all the sectors of industry. So there are some issues here where HR can play a huge role. at least from my analysis of Israel, but you, of course, know better than I do. So here's a little bit of stories to tell you, because I know you like a bit of facts. For me personally, in the last 15 years, HR has become much more fun to recruit in. Okay? It's just become more interesting. Why? Because the profile and the way that it's sort of evolved over time, and I'm talking about, you know, head of region as well. I do those. Less and less, but I do them. Or the chief HR profile. They have become really important roles where everybody wants to be a stakeholder in the final selection. If we look back even 7 or even 10 years ago, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was delegated to somebody out and somewhere, and you know, you made the appointment and you hope for the best, right? So the board is involved. I was recently doing a chief HR officer. I've done quite a few in the last year, but if I look at one of them, I suddenly get a phone call from the chairman. So we've had the briefing with the CEO. This is a big company, okay? This goes probably in the FTSE 20, okay? So it's huge. So CEO briefing, I get a phone call silently from the chairman saying, I need to talk to you urgently. I said, what have we done? He said, I want to put a stake in this. Here's what I want from the role. Here's what the non-executive board wants from the role. So it's those types of situations which make you sort of stand up and say, wow, okay? So that's number one. However, then I asked my team about 3 or whatever years, yeah, about 3 years ago, I said, do an analysis and go through all the chief HRs of all the top companies, so the Fortune 500s, right? And tell me, what is the demographic? What do they look like, right? I bet they're all, you know, majority female, and I bet they're really younger profiles. And so here was me being utopian and optimistic. And what I got back was the average age is rising. They're getting older. I think the average age was, and don't quote me now because I don't have the study here, about 54, 55. They're majority male. Look at this room. Just look at this room. It's you know, mainly females. Welcome to the male we have with us, yeah? It's mainly females. And by the way, sitting in a room like this, I recently did some stuff in Asia Pacific. It was also mainly females. Where are all the females going? What's happening, right? So there's a really, really,
It's a glass ceiling, isn't it?
I don't know.
I think that's one. I think you see these are also famous.
We couldn't understand you, can you?
Compare the head of the company to the HR.
Yeah.
I was amazed to see it's the same.
Yes, the CEO compared to the HR.
They would be male by default.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes. There you go. Good point. Yeah, so there you go. That argument probably falls down at some point. There's reasons for why there are similarities and differences too, but it's a good observation. So males, generally white, I'm not going to say Anglo-Saxon, but yes, right? How not surprising, and getting older. So it's kind of going the other way. But what was the interesting thing is how many were absolutely appointed on boards as opposed to reporting to the CAO, COO, and wherever else HR used to report, right? The chief cleaning person. And then the second thing is the increase in non-executive directors. The beauty of all of this is in Europe in particular. So America's always been more advanced in this space. It just is what it is. It's a much larger economy. In Europe, legislation is now pushing this up. And there's a big debate going on about whether we make official quotas by the EU. And the lady who's leading that, I met her the other day. She is a tough lady to withstand this because she's being fought, right, against, because she wants to do quotas. She said, let's push this with numbers and so on. A lot of opposition, so you have to be pretty tough to take on this battle. Courage, a lot of courage. But anyway, so a lot of that is now driving what's going on in terms of legislation. And of course, the corporate governance is also driving a lot of this because you need the remuneration committees. And for example, if any of you work in financial services, the Financial Services Authority is now mandated that every appointment at the board level has to be, you have to show that an executive search firm has been engaged and that there's been a look at the external market and internal market. So it's a completely interesting dynamic in terms of legal requirements. If I can summarize what I would see from a recruitment perspective, right? So this is practical stuff. I can also show you more graphs, but I think, you know, we're okay with that for now, and Joseph's done an amazing job explaining what that is. There are three things I see. There's more. Of course, there's always more, but three that I look for the most. The first one, prima facie, change management. How did you do it? Where did you do it? Where were you? When you were driving this change, where were you? Were you at the forefront of it? Were you sitting on the sidelines of it? Was it a mandated process in a very hierarchically driven company where you were sitting there and literally just implementing what the process is? So there is a formula and you drove the formula. The more ambiguous and the more uncoordinated, where you had to create order out of chaos and ambiguity, that would be my first point. Wouldn't be mine. At the end of the day, it's clients, right? It's the chairman and the CEOs. That's number one. Number two is really international. Okay? I'm surprised that we don't have any more people in the room today than this. And Amos kindly noted to say that English is probably the reason for that problem. There's a question for Israel, right? With the level of study and the level of intellectual education that this country provides, where is the English? Right? So is it not the onus on HR, each of you who are heads of HR, to be at the forefront of driving what the future is going to look like? I was recently invited, and it is an invitation because search people are never invited to these things, but we have a long-standing relationship with the American top companies, the top multinational HR people get together once a year. It used to be chaired by the chief HR of IBM, Randy. It is now chaired by Wendy, who is the chief HR of Merck. It's an amazing group, and their whole reason for existence is to lobby the government on behalf of the US. Because as companies, you see more than anybody what's going on in the real world. Where's our talent? What's not happening? You know, where are we losing people? What's our demographic mix globally? Can we move people from India to Mongolia, from Mongolia to Israel, Israel to... So HR sees this. So this body was created to literally lobby and drive Washington in terms of the decision. And they've had so much success over the last 10 years. I wonder if something like that in Israel exists, because there's certainly lots of opportunity for HR to influence how the world works.
But maybe you just, maybe you just threw a stone.
Right? Here's what I saw. I looked, and I couldn't find it. So, but then I thought maybe it's just my research skills. But you've just confirmed that. So here's an opportunity to think about English as one. But if English is the issue, then what's happening at the leadership levels? What's happening here at the leadership levels? How diverse are your boards? Management teams, right? So for a Spaniard or a Frenchman or a French woman, looking at the board and saying, do I want to work for this Israeli company? I mean, okay, if it's Cisco, it's different because it has a brand and it has a, yeah?
This is the discussion that we're going to talk to the panel. Exactly.
Okay, so I'll stop there because we'll open that up. But there's clearly certain things that, so the third thing, that's the third piece. So I said the first one was change management, real driver of change, right? And not being afraid, taking risk, and being the one on there on confidence, which was the last one in emotional. It's got to be very high, but it isn't. It isn't, okay? So change management, which is what they want, but we don't have. So at the moment, we're not showing that profile. Really international, and I don't mean I've lived in Israel and I've traveled to Greece for my holidays. It's truly international, and you know what the funniest thing is? I'm doing a couple of chief HR roles of really branded companies in America at the moment, and I'm starting, so again, it's just my perception over a period of time. The CEOs are saying, we really want an international person. Now, international 10 years ago in the US meant that he or she went on holidays in Italy.
The Caribbean.
Did they even have a passport?
Yeah, passport.
4% of Americans used to have a passport. 4%, wow. So what's 4%, right? Really international. So Ellie, don't bring anyone to the table unless they have lived and worked in Asia or whatever it is, okay? So that's a must. And then the third one, which I was slowly but surely getting to, is commercial business driver. Where are the problems in the business? What does the business look like? So the trend that I saw in Europe in particular, and it was a bit more European in this case, I think Europe is driving it just because of the diversity we have, I just lost my train of thought, but I'll come back to it in a second. It happens. Wiring. Is the whole piece, yes, of putting chief HR officers who've never ever done a day of work in HR. So this became a trend. So the chief HR officers were coming from operations, IT, finance, marketing.
It's common in
anything.
banks in Israel. Banks in Israel rarely have HR professional HR people. Yeah.
Yeah. So the latest one of the biggest companies you will know, the latest one, literally hot off the press, is Nestle. Yet again, have put a business person into the role. Well, by the way, I did the search for Nestle 2 searches ago, and we knew it was going to be an internal placement. We just did the right due diligence to see here is the best in the market. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. It works sometimes, but it doesn't work. Why? Because within 3 years they're out. So what it has is it doesn't have sustainability, which is the future of companies, right? It's all about sustainability now, not short-term focus, longer term. So these guys transit in, transit out. What they bring at the end of the day in our kind of mild analysis is operational. They fix the factory, which HR executives don't always do. So it's seeking that balance between operational and strategic, and I think the panel would talk about this, so I'll stop there. It's just introducing a concept. The one biggest criticism I will have of HR, because I see HR people day in and day out, so you know, as my children always ask me, how do you do this? I do this because I see the vision, I see the transition, right? HR is going up, and it is an incredibly important function, more and more. And boards, playing that role between the chairman and the CEO is amazing, incredibly complex and very tough. So the one criticism I would have is quite often I will say to a candidate that I've met for the first time and I'm listening to them, and if it really annoys me, I'll say, HR focuses on itself. Yeah. Do you know what's going on outside? Everything is about, we fix this, we set up this department, we ran this reorganization within ourselves. I said, so this reorganization you ran, can I ask you, what impact did it have on the business? And then I get this blank stare. Yeah, but we became better. I said, really? From day 1 to day 2, you suddenly became better. And the person that was interfacing with the business ceased to exist, and from Monday to Tuesday, they suddenly had a different conversation. So the biggest criticism, and I can afford to do this because I sit in a search firm, is HR focuses way too much on itself. And at the end of the day, so much energy, complex thinking, creative thinking is going into that instead of what the hell is going on in the business. And can we be 1 step or 2 steps? And when I sit with an HR person who starts talking to me about the business and really where the business is going and and how HR then supported it, that's the difference in the conversation. Now I stop.
Thank you, Ellie. Marvelous.